Welcome to Tales of Erotasy, a place for lust, lore, and legend. I'm your host, Erica B. Thank you so much for joining me on my first ever podcast. I hope that on this journey together, we'll make some magic. So, who am I and how did I get here? By day, I am just an average office worker. At night, though, I like to write to unwind. That writing led to me self-publishing several stories, which over the past few years I have done quite a few. All dark fantasy and sci-fi. However, my particular baby is my Tales Dripping in Crimson series. You're going to be hearing a lot about that series because that is the main thing I'm working on, but I'll tell you more about the world at a later date. Suffice to say, I have some experience in the self-publishing world and writing romance and erotica, and what skills I've gained over the last few years and the lessons I've learned, I want to share them with you. Whether it be what apps to use or good spots to publish your work, I want you to be able to pick my mind. I mean, after all, we're in this together. So that leads me to the purpose of this podcast. There are three main things I want to bring to you. And the first is, as I mentioned, to divulge the lessons I've learned over the last few years when it comes to self-publishing and writing. Second, I want to provide short stories, tasty tidbits of tales that titillate your mind and steamy, sensual, and magical delights as told by yours truly. If you couldn't tell, I love alliteration. It is one of my favorite things. Anyway, most of the stories told will be my own. However, you out there who may have your own stories, feel free to send them my way and I'll be happy to read them on the podcast. I am always going to be happy to pimp other people's fics. The third thing is I want to offer exposure, and I do not mean for myself. Every episode, I'll do quick reviews of short stories that are currently available on Kindle Unlimited. After all, my subscription to Kindle Unlimited is definitely burning a hole in my pocket, so I felt that I could do some good with it. My goal is to focus on new, fresh-faced authors who have published erotic romance or erotica in the sci-fi and fantasy genres. As of right now, these will be short stories, possibly something that can be read in a single night. My goal is to focus on stories that have no reviews as of time of recording. In my opinion, every artist deserves a chance to be seen, and I want you to know that I see you. So, my fellow travelers, I'm going to get real with you right now. There's a particular reason why I want to focus on artists who could use a little publicity, and that's going to have to take us into my past. When I was a child, there are two particular things I wanted to be. One was an author, which I have accomplished. However, the other was to be an actress. But here's the thing. My entire life, I've always been fat. There's no excuse for it. Well, no, I'll take that back. Currently, there is an excuse for it because I have a condition that makes it very hard for me to move around. But as a child, it was a different story. This led to a lot of bullying. Now, of course, this happened in school because kids are going to do what kids are going to do. But I also experienced some bullying at home. And it's funny, now that I'm an adult, I recognize the bullying I went through because at the time, I just thought that's how things were. At home, I was pushed into things like the upcoming fad diets like, oh, here, have this Slim Fast, or, hey, let's try the cabbage diet. But unfortunately, things like adjusting diet and exercise were never on the table. We didn't have a lot of money, and bad-for-you foods are a lot easier to come by than good-for-you foods when you have limited funds. I know that's not really an excuse, but that was the situation I was in when I was a little kid until my teenage years. At any rate, When I expressed that I wanted to be an actress when I grew up, I was told by someone I loved and trusted that I would never be a leading lady, that I would always be the friend character, so there's no point in me wanting to be an actress. As you can imagine, that was absolutely soul-crushing. It wasn't surprising because I was also told that if I lost some weight, I would be really pretty, and that continued way into my adulthood. When I got older and more independent, I was blessed to have people around me who encouraged my dreams. And at one point, I did do some acting. Of course, it was school plays, but I have to admit, I really enjoyed putting on the show. And from what I understand, I was fairly decent at it. I didn't have a whole lot of training at that point, just some drama classes, but I did well when I did the play in high school. And while I had the encouragement of people around me that cared and thought I had talent, I still had that voice in the back of my head, that asshole voice that told me that I was not good enough, that I'm not pretty enough, I'm not small enough, I'm too awkward. All those terrible things that if you are, you're never going to make it in Hollywood. So while I tried to pursue it, at least for a while, I gave up very easily and didn't fight for it. And ever since then, I have been a little disappointed in myself, at least when it comes to the acting piece. Now, the writing part was always encouraged because the person that was close to me, that gave me the negative feelings towards acting, fancies themselves a writer, so I'm following in their footsteps. At least according to that person. But writing, like any art, is kind of hard to break into. Despite how hard it is, I still say you should pursue it. Because even if no one reads what you write, there is some comfort in accomplishing the writing. And if you can find joy in that, it doesn't matter who reads your work, or if it ever gets reviewed or purchased, whatever, because it's fulfilling to yourself. That being said, my major goal for this podcast is to encourage other writers to pursue their writing dreams. Yes, there is the enjoyment of the storytelling, but when somebody sees you, it does make you feel better and gives you a little bit extra oomph to get your writing going. So while I may be a nobody in the great scheme of all the self-published authors out there, if I can encourage another writer to keep following their dream by talking about a story or posting about one of their stories to tell them how I enjoyed it, outside of just regular reviews, that would make me feel really good. I want to help them silence the asshole voice that's preventing them from going on. And if I can entertain others in the process, that's even better. So there you have it, the long and the short of the true when it comes to Tales of Erotasy. I swear to you, the rest of the podcast will not be this heavy. I'm here to have fun, and I want you to have fun too. Before I continue though, there is one thing I want to say. I want to give a special shout out to my friend Tommy, because without him, I would not be where I am when it comes to writing. 20 years ago, he started a forum RPG and convinced me to join. Yes, I know, I'm old. I remember forum RPGs. Anyway, he built this game so he could work on his own story called Nightcrest or New Celine. That way, he could figure out the plot a bit better. And after a time, I absolutely fell in love with the world. I had my own characters. As a matter of fact, my very first character was based on me. My husband joined in, but this was before we even started dating. And we all had a really good time together working on Nightcrest and building the world and fixing the lore. We're not really fixing the lore, but expanding upon the lore. And when it ended, I was still very enamored in the world. And Tommy and I used to have discussions about the story, even though we no longer played the game. Eventually, I took my characters and started writing their own stories that were based in Nightcrest. But after a time, I realized that I needed to separate my story from his world because I didn't want to steal his work. So that's where Crimson came from. See, I told you I'd get back to Crimson. But this is not the full detail. This is kind of the early rundown. So Crimson is now loosely based on Nightcrest. My characters are still in the story for Crimson, but some of their names have changed and a lot of their situations have changed. But without the solid foundation that Tommy built for me to even build a world, if he hadn't done that, I would have never started writing the story myself. And I definitely wouldn't have started writing the types of stories I do. I was not that brave. So Tommy, or as we like to call him, Diddles, we do not know why we call him that. Thank you so much for exposing me to your world, because it helped me build my world. And for that, I will forever be grateful. I hope you continue writing. I know you have a lot on your plate, but you're a great writer. And I want to be able to read one of your books one day. Woo! Now that that's out of the way, here's some very light housekeeping things. First of all, if you are interested in purchasing one of my stories, I do have a bookstore. If you go to books.ericabeale.com, that's ERICABEALE.com, my books are available for sale. Also, there is the Tales of Erotasy newsletter available on my Substack. That's at talesoferotasy.substack.com. Of course, you can find all my socials there as well. I'm on YouTube, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. And if you do join my YouTube channel, or subscribe rather, I should say, I do have a couple of series on there of audio stories for Crimson. I also have a series where it's Reddit stories, but they're retold in a storyteller fashion for ease of listening. And also, since I usually use very calming music, it's very relaxing. Then there is the very silly series of Smut Writer's Tragic Past. And it's not what you think. It's actually a chronicle of me eating some of the worst stuff I've ever had, candy-wise, for the most part. And they're very silly, but also think they're very fun if you just need a chuckle. Deep in my heart, part of me wants to sue Brock's because of some of their candy corn. Which, by the way, candy corn is possibly the root of all evil. That and black licorice, just FYI. All right, if you're still here with me, thank you so much. I know I did a lot of babbling back there, but this is an introductory podcast. I promise everything will be more streamlined next time. In the meantime, though, I do have a story to read for you today. Again, if you have a story that you'd like me to read, you can always reach out to me via my Substack. If you subscribe, you can chat with me and send it my way. I'd be so tickled pink to be able to read one of your stories. So for this first one, it is one of mine. It is called Succubus. I actually submitted this to the Molotov Cocktail for their monster story contest a couple weeks ago. And unfortunately, I didn't get the top 10 and I didn't win, but I did get an honorable mention, which they call close but no cigar. And I gotta tell you, in my heart, that was a win. It felt really good to know that my story made it through several rounds, even if it didn't make it all the way. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to get my sexy voice on. I'm not sure if I actually have one or not, but I'll try to use one for this story. Without further ado, this is Succubus by Erica Beale. The bar was empty. Only the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind me kept me company. I wiped down the counter again. Honestly, there wasn't a speck of dust or a smudge left on it. The old wood gleamed under the lowlights. Truthfully, I only kept myself busy because I knew she'd be here soon. Under the bar, the knife lay ready, its handle smooth and worn, fitting my hand perfectly. I honed the blade only an hour ago, stroking it against the whetstone until the edge could slice paper clean through. It should have made me feel ready, but it didn't. Every night I told myself it would be different, that this time I'd drive that blade home before she even had a chance to speak. But I knew she would look at me with those bright violet eyes, and it would make every protest in my chest shrivel. I had to fight her. I had to fight myself. Yet, I always knew how it would end. Her laugh reached me before she did. A slow, rich sound that curled in my ears and primed my body with interest. "Still here, Kip?" she called, her voice honey-sweet with just enough bite to remind me it wasn't honey at all. I didn't turn to look at her. Not yet. "Bar's closed." "You say that every night." Her footsteps padded across the floor. I heard the faint shift of her weight as she leaned on the counter, but I kept my back to her. The room felt smaller with her in it, the air thick with the faint scent of jasmine and something darker, like smoke after a fire. "Silly boy, I don't know why you bother with that knife," she said. I stared down at my reflection in the bar's polished surface. My jaw was tight, and my eyes are harder than they used to be. "Well, I might surprise you one day." She laughed again, the sound wrapping around me like a velvet noose. Finally, I turned. She leaned on the bar as if her old friend sharing a drink. Her tawny skin glowed in the dim light, and her dark, thick curls framed her face just a little too perfectly to be real. Her dress clung to her body, black and sleek, with a slit along the thighs showing just enough to make it hard to look away. Ruby red lips curved into a smile. "Pour me a drink?" I stepped around the bar, keeping the knife hidden at my side. "Not tonight." She tilted her head, watched me like I was the one that didn't belong in my bar. Her dark eyes sparkled, the light catching in a way that it wasn't natural. For a moment, I saw a glow of violet beneath the surface of her eyes. "Do you even know what you would do without me?" she asked. "I'd be free." Her smile widened. "Free? From me? Or from yourself?" Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. The knife, it felt heavier in my hands as she stepped closer. Her beauty shifted as she moved around, the perfect edges of her face softening and blurring. I blinked, and for a heartbeat, I saw her for what she actually was. Her eyes burned that violet, bright as flames. Her teeth were sharp and too many. Her claws brushed my face. It didn't hurt, but the scrape of them against my skin sent a tremor through me. Excitement and hunger I wanted to forget. "You never fight me, Kip," she murmured, her voice lower now, rougher. Not really. The knife shook in my grip. She watched me with the patience of a predator. Go on. Kill me then, she said. Her challenge hung in the air, daring me to follow through. My chest tightened from the weight of her power pressing down on me. I raised the blade, holding it between us. It felt like a fragile thing compared to the creature before me. She cupped my face with her left hand. Her claws pressed harder now, enough to prick my skin. The sting browned at me, but my resolve faltered. Do it, she said again, her voice softer now, almost tender. If you want me gone, do it. I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. But my hand refused to move. Her smile returned, slow and knowing. She stepped even closer until the knife fell from my fingers and hit the floor with a dull clatter. Oh, Kip, I can taste your desires. You don't want me gone, she said. You'll never want me gone. I should have pushed her away. Should have walked out that bar and never looked back. But my hands betrayed me, rising to rest on her hips. All you'll ever do is want me. Her lips brushed mine. They were soft and inviting. The faintest pressure of them was enough to make my head spin. Then, her sharp teeth caught my lip, the sudden pain cutting through me. At the end, when I kissed her back, I surrendered. Okay, so that's it. That was Succubus. Oddly enough, it's kind of a fan fiction of the Crimson Tales. If you read Bait, you'll see that Kip is a character in that story, and there is a succubus involved. That's my first baby. We'll probably talk about that one next time. Really, I should have used a southern accent because he is very southern in the story, but I really didn't want to insult anyone by trying to do a deep southern accent, so I didn't. All right, fellow travelers, we are at the end of the show. Again, thank you so much for joining me on my very first episode of Tales of Erotasy. Next time, we'll have some reviews, another story to read, some helpful hints in regards to a writing career for those who are out there also looking to self-publish. I hope you had as much fun listening as I had making this podcast. Again, thank you for joining me on this journey through lust, lore, and legend. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. It's the best way to keep the passion alive. And until next time, stay curious, stay daring, and keep dreaming of worlds beyond.